Welcome back to History Today. Last week, we looked at the establishment of the religion of Numa in the development of the Lex Sacra, by which the gods were bound to legal agreements with individuals and with the city Rome. Today, we're going to take a look at the priests and priestesses of the Roman religion. Now, Roman families were the basic unit of life, and in these families, the pater familias, or the head of household, the father of the family, was entrusted with the physical, social, economic, and religious prosperity of his family. With certain rites and aspects of the religion being kept by either men or women, the pater would entrust his wife and daughters to the tending of the hearth or fire of the house, and the tending of the storehouses, and things of the domain of other female goddesses and numen. The mother would be the head of these rites, and together with the sisters or the daughters, they would look after the religious responsibilities to the goddesses and numen related to their work. The father, likewise, would take the sons, and they would together address the gods and numen related to the fields and the borders and some of the other household gods. Just like the family had the pater familias with the mother, daughters, and sons, the Roman state religion was organized like one big family, with the father, mother, daughters, and sons administering the rituals. The state was said to be an enlarged household. There was the Rex Sacrorum and Regina Sacrorum, who were a married couple in charge of keeping the agreements between the gods and the state, and conducting the rituals proper to them. The sons and daughters, the metaphorical sons and daughters, were typically referred to as flamen, who were in charge of doing the rituals for their specific deity. These things could range from cleaning the shields of Mars, tending to the sacred fire of Vesta, and performing sacrifices. While the household religious practices were close and intimate for each family, the state practices were not personal, and so they tended to lack an emotional character. Practice and right performance were prioritized, but nothing comparable to what we would call devotion today. It's for this reason that Cicero tells us of the Furinalia festival, and says that it was very curious. He said no one knew what the purpose of the festival was, and very few people even knew the true name of the goddess who was being honored. But because it was handed down to them, apparently as a goddess who had aided the state in some way, who they were bound in agreement to, they continued to honor her with this festival for centuries. Now, you may have noticed that I've said that these priests were in charge of conducting rituals, but they were not in charge of making them, or of ensuring that the rituals were properly done. The oversight aspect was done by the pontiffs, who were led by the Pontifex Maximus. These men were chosen particularly for their legal expertise, which they had already demonstrated. The Pontifex Maximus lived in King Numa's home, which was a palace, because it was in his role that the major religious concept was protected, the important idea that the gods and men could be bound in mutual legal agreement. The rituals were expected to be faultlessly performed so that no god could say that there was an error in the agreement. Scrupulous care was taken in every single action, and it was said that the slightest error could invalidate the ritual. Even a mouse squeaking at the wrong time was enough to necessitate completely starting over the ritual. Such care was taken in both practice and word that one ancient song sung by priests of Mars, the Salii, was said to have been sung so flawlessly. But Quintilian indicates that it was in such archaic language that no one, not even the priests, understood what was being sung. Details, not belief, was the priority. The typical ritual included a priest the same gender as the god performing a sacrifice of a consumable related to the god. This could be horses for Mars, millet and milk for Parilia. It could be something as simple as the general agricultural sacrifice, which was the sacrifice of a bull, a pig, and a sheep. There was a goddess named the Bonadea, who would be offered wine in her sacrifice. But due to her origin as a rural deity, the wine was always referred to and talked about as milk during the sacrifice. Apparently, only the words were specified, but the materials for the ritual were not. The Rex and Regina Sacrorum, the Flamen, and the Priestesses were all seen as sacrosanct, which meant that the punishment for harming them was the death penalty. These priests and priestesses were seen as special, and so to treat them well was a way to find favor with the gods and goddesses. Even to see a Vestal Virgin was said to give fortune. Vestal Virgins also had a particular privilege that they could free servants at will, which was not extremely used, but they did have the capacity. None of the priests or priestesses were permitted to exit the city Rome, obviously. And they were not allowed to engage in politics, or war, certainly, lest ever the city be in danger. The priests and priestesses must be present to protect the city. Keeping the gods happy, then, was a 24/7 responsibility. The priests held their positions either for terms or for life, depending on the specific kind. But the pontiffs, while they were men associated with and very close to the religion, they were normal citizens in most regards, and they tended to engage in typical Roman political tract positions. After all, the Pontifex Maximus, as well as almost all of the pontiffs, typically came from the political class. They were lawyers, and engaged in typical lawyerly political roles as consuls, senators, quaestors, aediles. This was only a part-time job, after all, and in any way, the only people who could correct them were the gods, who tended to be rather quiet. The typical farmer spent little time in the city Rome, and so had very limited interaction with the Flamen or priestesses. But this had very little impact on the farmer's worship of the gods and goddesses, because their religion was based far more on local practice and personal relationship and agreements than the large festivals and intricacies inside the city of Rome. The pontiffs and priests could be consulted by citizens for different reasons, like preparation for a specific kind of marriage, or in anticipation of military campaigns, which were two immensely important aspects of a person's life. Regarding the soldiers, the camaraderie and closeness in trial, and the threat of passing in battle, caused the soldiers to be some of the most religious citizens and the most concerned about divine fortune. Prior to each military decision, the commanders of the soldiers would consult the gods through augury, fortune-telling, through the use of animal entrails or looking at the birds, or sacrifices would be made to ensure that the gods remained on the side of the Roman army. There are stories of these sacrifices having to be repeated up to a dozen times until the right signs were seen before an expedition could begin. The curious religion that the Romans had prior to Greek influence came from the rural household and was copied into the metaphorical household of the state. The religion changed from magical to numen or nymph based to gods based. And it shifted from being less predictable to legally bound in law. Here, we're going to take a pause and start looking at a few new topics and try out a couple of new formats for videos. Thank you for sticking around so far, and I hope to see you in the next video.